We're having fun with this guy right here. What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? Tyler James here, and I am jumping on live to do a little live stream presentation reflecting on the last 10 years of creating this bad boy, the Red 10 Volume 1. Volume 1 and Volume 2. I'm like looking at myself and everything's backwards. So mirror vision. But yeah, this is a superhero murder mystery that I've created with my partner in crime, Cesar Feliciano, and a number of other creators that I will hopefully give shout outs to over the course of this broadcast. But what's cool about this is we launched this project to bring the second volume, which is never been collected. We launched this to bring this volume to life just 10 days ago, and we were fully funded in like the first 5 hours. We just crossed $16,000. I didn't notice that, so awesome. Great to see that. Thank you, whoever pushed us over the 16K mark. And what I really want to do with this broadcast is jump on and share some lessons on this project. And so if you're watching us live, I'm streaming just about everywhere. I see Scotty's in the house. What's up, Scotty? Love that you dig the minifig. Yes, shout out to Justin over at saberscorpion.com who rocked this custom minifig for us, which is available in the Kickstarter campaign, of course. And let's see who else we have. Everborn Saga, saying hello. He's watching us over on YouTube. So yes, if you're watching us, you may be watching us from a number, and if I say us, I mean me and this custom minifig. If you're watching us, you could be watching us on the Kickstarter page, because I just checked and we are simulcasting on the Kickstarter page. We're simulcasting on multiple Facebook feeds, and I'm also simulcasting over on YouTube. And so feel free to leave a comment. If you are a backer, shout us out, shout yourself out so we can give you a virtual high five. And if you have any questions as I go through this, feel free to ask them. Of course, as you can probably see, we are in the final hours of the Kickstarter campaign. So this is just a great opportunity for me to jump on here live with all of you, share some insights, thank the backers. But also really what I want to do is for all you creators out there, maybe you're a creator who is embarking on a big project of your own right now, or maybe you're in the midst of a big project. I think some of these insights will be of value to you, and so I that's my intention for all of you, is to say shout outs to our fans and then to drop some insight for all of you, because that's what I do on a pretty regular basis on the Comics Launch podcast, which is available over at comicslaunch.com. And I've been, writing about this stuff for creators for many, many years now. And it's been a big part of what we do over on Comics Tribe. So if you have questions, or if you want to just let me know that you're watching, feel free to use the comments over on Facebook or YouTube. Unfortunately, you can't comment directly on the Kickstarter page. So if you're watching this on Kickstarter, you can head over to YouTube or Facebook, and you'll find us. All right. So let me dive into this. These are 10 lessons learned creating a 10-issue maxi-series over 10 years. All right. Tip number one, or lesson learned number one, super, super important. Talk to creators at conventions. Talk to other creators at conventions. Talk to the people that are on both sides of you. I got to tell you, had I not talked and engaged and had a nice chat with the creator that was tabling directly next to me at one random, I believe it was Comic-Con, I don't know, 2007. I'm just guessing. I'd have to look back exactly to figure it out. 2007, 2008. Had I not been, by the twist of fate, put right next to Cesar Feliciano, who became the artist and co-creator of the Red 10 series, had I not been, just by the luck of the draw, placed next to him at a convention, this series never would have happened. And so much of your career going forward is going to depend on the people that you meet, the people that you know, the people that you interact with. And when you think about it, someone on the Comic-Con staff is just randomly, sitting around and and doing his job, putting together the table artists. Little did he or she know, and probably little does he or she know today, that decision that he or she probably didn't take more than a couple minutes to think, resulted in this series. So pretty amazing, right? It's pretty amazing how that works out. But that alone, just putting me next to Caesar, would not have done it. And to be perfectly honest with you, I am an introvert. All right. I'm an introvert, and it might seem weird that that's the case, especially if you've been hearing me on Facebook, or you've been listening to my podcast and I've been in your ear, or you see me popping up in your feeds, or I'm in your inbox, always like they're chatting. That may seem like odd that I'm an introvert, but I am. And, really an introvert means just like, how do you get energy? Do you get energy from being around a lot of people, or does that sort of sap your energy? And it's definitely the case where, conventions, after a convention is over, I am completely done, exhausted. I need quiet. I need recharge time. And as a result, my initial tendency is to really just focus on what I'm doing at the convention, because it's hard enough, talking and pitching to, a million potential customers or fans. And so doing that and trying to make connections and meet and talk with other creators at conventions can be tough for me. And I know that comic creators tend to actually attract, I think, disproportionate more introverts than extroverts. Let's face it. If you are going to be like a comic book artist or a writer, you're going to spend a lot of time all alone, by yourself, drawing, writing, in your own head, right? And so that attracts a lot of introverts. And so we need to recognize and force ourselves sometimes to get out of our comfort zone and make connections with the creators that are around us, especially the creators that that are in our immediate proximity during a convention. And so I want to challenge all of you that are creators and that do conventions. Talk to more creators at a convention. Make it a goal to just make five genuine handshake connections with other creators there. And if 5's too much, make it 2, right? But just get in that habit of doing it. And I did my first convention in a while last week, and I made sure to do that with the creator that was right next to me. Not only did that creator buy a book from my table, but he also looks like a promising artist for a potential new project. So that's a double win. But even if it's not that case, you never know what's going to happen when you make those connections. So that was lesson number 1. Talk to creators at cons. All right. Here's lesson number 2. All right. Because lesson number 2 from the Red 10 is that when you are pitching potential collaborators, give him, her, or them a choice as to the project to work with you on. All right. Now, this is specifically for writers who are out there going to look for artists, but it could be, other things as well. But when the part of the reason how the Red 10 came about was sort of double luck. Obviously, I said I first made that connection with Caesar at Comic-Con, but there was no indication or no expectation that we would work together after that convention. But what ended up happening is we made that connection. Like many creators, David Byrne says he's built many, many great relationships at cons. Scotty White is a fan of meeting everyone in his neighborhood at cons. It's fun and helpful, and you meet great people. Absolutely positively the way it goes. But just because you meet someone doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to work with them or they're going to want to work with you. And so that's where the follow-up can be extremely powerful and important. And so after the campaign was over, Caesar and I followed each other on social, would interact a little bit here and there. And I think it was several months later, might have even been a year later after we met, but he posted that his latest project had just wrapped and he was looking for something new. And it was a good thing that I saw that, because immediately I was like, let me, I've got this Red 10 project that I'm really excited about. But let me see if Caesar might be interested. But I also didn't want to presume that would be right up his alley. And so what I actually did, because in addition to the Red 10, I had some other projects that were out there. The Red 10 was the one that I was most excited to jump on. and work on with him. But what I did was I sent him about 3 or 4 other pitches for potential projects, just sort of like, here's the title, here's the log line, and roughly what it's like. So, the email itself was a pretty short email, but just, 3 or 4 bullet things. I think I may, sorry, Caesar, I may have put in a couple of pitches that I really didn't want him to work on that were a little undercooked so that it would make the Red 10 look a little bit better and more exciting and more up his alley. So that's maybe a little bonus behind the scenes trick that I did there. But the general thing that I wanted to convey to him is that I was looking for a collaborator, and I wanted to make sure that the collaborator felt like, hey, he has some options. And what I also wanted to convey was that, hey, I'm a guy with good ideas, right? And so Caesar came back and said that he just had an awesome, like he read a couple of them. A couple of them looked up his alley, but the one that really stood out happened to be the Red 10. And for me, that was a really good sign. But sometimes, sometimes we could miss out on really good creative partnerships if we have just tunnel vision about the one idea that we have, and we present that to a creator, and he or she's not interested, right? And so they might just give you a no. Whereas had you given him like the top 2 or 3 ideas that you were interested in, who knows? One of them might have been, right up his or her alley. So that was tip number 2, lesson number 2, that when pitching a potential collaborator, it's a great idea to give him or her the choice. All right. So it's almost like I paid Adam here to help me with my transition, because, no, I didn't. But Adam asked the question, 10 volume murder mystery countdown is a great concept. Did you have the ending in mind when you wrote it? Great question, Adam. And this leads me to lesson number 4. When you're going to be doing a project of this scope, when you're doing a mystery, when you're doing a maxi-series that all needs to really come together and that has a high concept hook, a lot of times, and this is something that a lot of indie folks need to know, because I've come across a lot of indie creators where they've got great ideas, or they've got great high concept, but it's almost like the better your high concept, the more like, wow, I've never heard something like that, or wow, that's a great idea, or wow, why didn't I think of that? You have to, like, the higher that is, then the expectations for what you're going to deliver on an end product really do go up. And so you really do need to deliver, especially when you have a really great idea, right? Or a great high concept, or a book that can be sold on the high concept. The Red 10, there's a lot of different ways, and we'll talk about pitching, because that's one of my tips, or one of my lessons learned a little bit later. But, the Red 10 is one of the simplest high concepts to get. 10-issue murder mystery, 10 heroes track a villain to an island, and everything goes to hell. And one by one character in each issue is killed off. I'm sort of telling you, I'm giving you the fact that everyone is, that characters are being eliminated. But so that's not, the surprise. Like, I'm not trying to surprise you with character deaths because, or spring a character death on you just for a sales bump. Like, it's baked into the premise, right? But when you do that you need to elevate and make sure that you're delivering on it. And so lesson number 3 was that if you're going to be doing something of this scope, you better have a story Bible. And I'm actually just going to pull up right here for you. This is the Red 10 story Bible. I actually haven't looked in this in a while because the series has been, like, the scripts have been written for this for a long time. But so this is the Red 10 story Bible, and it's a 42-page document, which, probably is a lot less than it could have been. But in this, it's important to have things laid out, like your characters, and just know it inside and out. And so before I even wrote the first issue of the Red 10, I basically made sure that I had I had the story broken down, right? And I kept it to traditional 3-act structure. in terms of, all right, here's what happens in Act 1, here's what happens in Act 2, here's what happens in Act 3. And I made sure before I even wrote issue 1 that I knew how it ended, that I knew how, that I knew, who was dying in each issue. And I knew how those deaths, and I knew sort of what cards were going to be revealed, like, because it's a mystery, right? And part of a mystery is you need to be revealing cards, revealing secrets, revealing things as you go. And so I had, at the very high level, the entire thing filled out and done. But here's one thing that I did, which, or that I did at the initial concept, which I didn't end up pulling off, or I didn't end up going with. But originally, my goal was to actually have 3 different endings written, just like Clue. All right. If you might remember the movie Clue, like, and it was, I guess it was a box office flop because it was kind of confusing. But when Clue released to theaters, they split up the film reels so that actually, like, theaters got one of 3 endings. And it wasn't until it came to home video that you would buy the home video, and then you got all 3 endings. All right. And that was designed, and it was sort of like a big thing. And so originally I had this vision of, I'm going to release it, and then for the 10th issue, when the 10th issue comes out in comic shops, it's going to be polybagged, and you won't know which of 3 endings that you'll get at the end. Great idea in concept, but in practice, the idea of drawing 3 complete, or even, mostly different final issues, and making them all work, and making them all add up, it just became too big a puzzle, to actually, come together with. And so, in terms of that, Adam, and he sort of had experience with this with some of his stuff, with the Tide. And this is an architect rather than gardener approach, right? Yeah. Do not recommend pants writing if what you're trying to do is to write a murder mystery. All right. Because, or if you're trying to write something that sort of revolves around structure, right? Because, the other thing about comics is, all right, we're doing it, and each issue is 12 pages, and you have to have a death in each one. Also, as you go through the series, we don't want it to be, we wanted it to not make it absolutely 100% clear who was going to die in each issue, right? And so we couldn't just focus on, like, in this issue, this is the issue about this character, and then he dies. And then the next issue, this is the issue about this character, and then he dies. Like, that wouldn't be that entertaining, because we still, like, coming in that someone's going to be killed in each issue. But part of the fun is, like, all right, who's going down next? And we had some creators, like, when the first couple issues come out, they're like, all right, here's my death order, here's my death pool. And that was kind of fun to see that come together. And to see that fans were excited about that stuff, and whoever just backed or pledged or whatever, thank you so much. But as and so, in addition to knowing, all right, here's who dies when, there was also, like, one of the concepts is that all of these sort of heroes, they're based on archetypes of characters from, like, the traditional big 2 teams. So, you'll recognize, at least at the outset, all right, this is my Superman or ultimate hero archetype, this is my speedster archetype, etc. But for each character, we wanted to come up with some interesting and dark sort of twists on those characters, so that you would see and start to reveal that, why are these characters being eliminated as they go. And so that was definitely something that needed to be planned ahead of time. Now, that said, one of the things that I enjoyed doing is the outlines themselves for those issues were actually quite short and quite, so this right here, issue 2, Death of Master Mage, spoiler alert, sorry. But this is all I had before I went and wrote that book, or wrote that issue. So this is not a lot of information to be turning into a 22-page book. And so that still left a lot of fun and a lot of areas to explore and a lot of ways to sort of discover my way around how that issue was going to play around. And so what I didn't do was write the entire series script by script by script up front. Because if I did that, I would have written that back in 2011, and then it would have taken, probably would have taken less time to get out. But usually what I tried to do was stay a script or two ahead of where the art was, and so that resulted in every time I came back to it, I would go back, I would read the previous issues, and then I would jump in, reread the previous issues, and then jump into the next script. And what was kind of nice about that, and obviously I was working with editor Stephen Forbes on this. We also had some additional edits and feedback from Sam Labat and Steve Colley over the course of the series. But what's nice about doing a project like this is you're going to get better as you go. And so that was also something that I sort of enjoyed doing, is that I was rereading previous issues, and then I felt like the series got stronger as it went around. So that's just was another thing. All right, lesson number 4, and this is related to the Story Bible stuff, but I'll actually point it out. Is if you're going to have a big cast of characters, your story grid becomes, or your character grid, excuse me. If you're going to have a big cast of characters, your character grid to manage that big cast of characters is going to be super important. And I wrote about a character grid in an article on, a blog that I no longer use. But basically a character grid is something like this, where you have just basic info about all of your characters. And you can use a spreadsheet, or I actually had it was in my notebook, and I just used sort of lines, and I wish I had that notebook, but I couldn't find it kicking around. I could show you the original character grid. And I remember actually being on an airplane, traveling for work, and just filling out my grid. And so some things that I put in the character grid, and it'll change a little bit depending upon what kind of story it is and everything, but things like, full name, role or purpose in the story, age, sex, race, main goal, what's their motivation, what's their inner need, what's their flaw. For mysteries, what's their secret? Everybody in a mystery has a secret or something they're hiding, or something that they don't want to get out. What's their core trait? What's their backstory? Do they have any special skills, props, or knowledge? Do they have quirks? What's their attitude? What kind of dialogue style do they have? Who would play them as if they were a celebrity? And so, you can come up with what's important, and you can make this as big or as small as you want. But if you're going to be working with a big cast of characters, you should really put this stuff in grid form so that you can look across and make sure that your characters aren't all identical, right? You want to make sure that they don't all have the same dialogue style, or they don't all have the same attitude, or they don't, or that just visually there's going to be different distinction and things like that. And this can be done again from the architecture standpoint, and should be done at the outset. Otherwise, you'll have a tendency to make all of your characters look, act, and sound like you. And that's not a good thing. So this little exercise forces you to make sure that there's diversity in the style of characters that you're presenting, so that there's conflict and engagement and distinction in the characters as you go. And that's still something that as a creator I'm working with and I work on, is just try to make sure that my characters all feel distinct and interesting in and of their own right. And that also, by having my book in grid form, it also let me see, okay, where are some characters, that would be, because as the series goes on in this book, as the series goes on, the characters start to become aware that it's not who they thought, or at least they think it's not who they thought, behind the original murder, and that it's one of them that may actually be behind this whole thing. And so as a result, even some of the best conflict from the from my story Bibles and the best conflict and the issues, like that all started by placing the entire team on a grid like this next to each other, and then saying, all right, who is naturally going to be, butt heads. And as it went on, like there's a big epic battle between these two characters that is set up early on in this. And by knowing that was coming, you could plant seeds early on, and the character grid really helped me do that. All right, how we doing? Let me know if if this is good for you guys. Let me know if you're where you're watching us from. I'm just curious, sort of how this stream is coming on. It looks like Adam's watching us from the YouTube. David's on Facebook. Scotty's on Facebook. But let me know where you're watching us from. And again, Adam said, looking forward to reading the Red 10. Looking forward to having you read her, Adam. I really do appreciate your support. And thanks for upgrading your pledge based on the live stream. And so for those of you that are doing Kickstarter launches, this is one of the best things and the easiest things that you can do during your Kickstarter launch is just jump on live. And this is sort of a bonus tip. I'm seeing a lot of creators right now in the sky is falling on Kickstarter and having tough times with their launches. And I've got to tell you, action is what is going to make things happen on your Kickstarter. So instead of complaining, instead of worrying, instead of wondering if the algorithm is suppressing you or this or that, just jump on live and talk to some of your fans and some of your friends. And as a bonus tip, after you go on live, go ahead and download that video, turn it into audio, trim it up a little bit if you want to do a little bit of editing, and this right here could become a bonus audio commentary that you give to your backers, either as a stretch goal, as an upgraded pledge level, or as a part of the audio bundle that you're given. All right. One of the easiest things that you can do, you just got to carve out a little time, jump on live and chat with people. All right. And we have, Jorgen. What's up, Jorgen? Coming in from Sweden. All right. If anybody's coming away, I'm coming to you from Newburyport, Massachusetts, which is close to Boston. If anybody's coming to us, watching us farther away from Sweden, you let me know too. But Jorgen may have the record there. All right. So we've talked about the importance of talking to creators at cons. We've talked about giving your potential collaborators a choice before you throw just one pitch at them and you lock yourself into that pitch. We talked about the power of having the Bible and knowing your ending, especially if you're doing a big Maxi-Series that has a structure to it or is a mystery. I showed you the power of the character grid. The next thing I want to talk about is how important it is to have great covers and how having great covers will open doors for you, especially if you're just getting started. So prior to the Red 10, there was no Comics Tribe. There was no Kickstarter. There was no, and for me, I had a couple of series and a couple of, and like a web comic that was going on, but I had no books in comic shops. And the only real place that I was doing, that was selling much was at conventions. All right. And so, but I knew with the Red 10 that I wanted this to help us level up. And I also saw the Red 10 as being, really the flagship title that I personally would launch under what would become Comics Tribe. All right. And we had a couple of projects. For those of you that have been following Comics Tribe since the very beginning, you may remember that we really launched with 3 series. We launched with the Red 10. We launched with Scam from Joe Mulvey. And we launched with The Standard by John Lees and Jonathan Rector. So that was like the 3-headed beast that we were going to use to punctuate and get into the direct market. But one of the things that I sort of recognized in doing all my research is, one of the things that creators need to have a book successful in comic shops, in the direct market, is they need to give retailers a book that they can actually sell. And retailers, they have one of the toughest jobs in the industry in that, they've got to buy stuff for 50% off the cover price. And it's in most cases, it's non-returnable. So if it doesn't sell, they lose money, and they lose a lot of money potentially. And so one of the biggest indicators that retailers use to determine whether or not their books will sell, a book that they'll buy will sell, is, well, have I made money on this creator or this creative team before? So for independent creators like us, and for independent creators like Caesar and myself at that time, that's trouble, right? Like, if you're telling me you've got to have sold books before in order to sell books, well, how does anyone ever get started, right? Chicken and egg problem, catch 22. And so what I decided to do, and what we decided to do in order to help retailers have more confidence in our series, is I reached out to a creator, again, a creator that I'd met at this one time. It wasn't at a convention, but at a signing. And I reached out to this creator at a signing who was already sort of an up-and-coming creator, semi-local, and he had a book that was a hit with retailers. It was an indie hit with retailers. The book was called The Stuff of Legend. The creator was Charles Paul Wilson. By now you probably know his stuff from The Stuff of Legend or Wraith or some other things that he's done from IDW. But Charles was someone that, with The Stuff of Legend and the breakout success of that, now had a fan base, and he had retailers that believed in him and his work and the work, and we're doing well with The Stuff of Legend. And so I reached out to Charles and I said, hey, would you do a cover for us? And the thinking behind that was that, neither Caesar or I had a lot of penetration and awareness inside the direct market. And I also knew that we were going to start, even before we took it to Diamond, we were going to start by doing a micro distribution print run and a micro distribution approach, where we were going to approach like the 25 to 50 most indie friendly comic shops in the country and pitch them directly, as opposed to going to the direct market first. And by the fact that they were already familiar with CP's work, and the fact that CP does phenomenal work, you can see the Red 10 cover. It's pretty amazing. We actually have all of the original art for the Red 10 available during this Kickstarter, which is pretty cool. So you can see all of the original art that CP did for this campaign and did over the course of the series. But by doing that made it so much easier for retailers to take Comics Tribe seriously and to be interested in stocking the Red 10, because there was at least one person on the creative team that they were familiar with and that we're making money on. All right. And so that's one of those things for you independent creators. If you're going to skimp anywhere, the cover is not the place to skimp, because and in some cases, just the simple fact of getting a cover by a creator who already has some juice in the market that you want to sell in can be incredibly effective. And I've seen that not just in the direct market, but also on Kickstarter. I've seen creators that have had success getting a cover by a creator that has a big Kickstarter audience. And especially if that creator is willing to share that they did the cover with their Kickstarter backers, that can be a tremendous way to get more support for your book. All right. So that's tip number 5. Great cover art opens doors. All right. Now, number 6 is to experiment with variants. All right. Now, the Red 10 series did not have a ton of variants. Actually, most of these issues did not have variants, but some did. And if you've been following Comics Tribe over the years, you know that we've had fun doing a lot of variants, and we do a lot of cool variants. And we're actually, for the Red 10 Kickstarter campaign, we're putting out a new metallic cover for limited edition for number 1. The Red 10 number 1, we've actually been sold out of all of the print runs of that for multiple years now. And so we're getting this back into print with a special limited edition metallic bloody version. I'm excited about that one. Can't wait to get that one in hand. But prior to the Red 10, or prior to that, I played around with some variants, and the funniest variant, and here's a variant. When you hear about this, you'll think I'm ridiculous. But one of the things that I realized, with it was the power of the variant, with a variant that I did for the Red 10 #2. So this was the standard edition cover for the Red 10. All right. But I had this concept, and in the Red 10 series, right? So in the Red 10 series, when they come to the island, they discover that there's statues, marble statues of each of the heroes that are just there in the room, as if whoever was there, or as if the killer was waiting for all of them, right? So they show up and there's statues of each of them. And as each character is killed off, somehow each statue gets a blood smear on the face. All right. So, one by one, like the statue then gets a blood smear on it, right? And so that's kind of one of the hooks, one of the things to keep going, and sort of like, wait, how are these blood smears happening, et cetera. And so I had this concept for a variant called the blood smeared variant, where I would actually literally print out the cover and get fake blood and literally smear it and then spray it down so that the blood would just be like paint. And then sign those, and then that would be a variant that I would sell at a premium. I think I only sold them for like $10 a piece, but you get the standard edition for $5, or the bloodstained variant. Oh, maybe it was 15 for 15, right? And we sold a ton of the bloodstained variants. People loved them. Now, as it turned out, making the bloodstained variants was an absolute nightmare. It was super messy. They did, like, the blood that I had to go through a couple different versions of the hand smeared blood. Like, I was literally, had them all out. I was in my 3rd floor apartment at the time. Like, it was cold out. So, like, the wind's blowing. I lost a couple books to the wind blowing away. Couldn't do it inside because of the spray that I was using to try to make it so that the blood would stay on and then just be like, and would dry up properly. The books were flying away. It was madness, right? It was chaos. And then, like, even, the book themselves, like, with like the blood itself, I realized, like, would fade over time. So it was a nightmare. But I realized that having something that fans had not seen before, and having a premium high-end variant that was limited, that ended up being an eye-opener that, you know what? Comics don't all have to be one price. You can have a standard edition of your comic, and you can have a cool, unique, higher end, more collectible version of your comic. And that's okay. And it's okay if most people don't get the blood smeared variant. Nope, everybody doesn't need it. But for people that get it, well, they got something a little bit interesting and new, and something that most people don't get. So I was definitely that really got me excited about playing the variant game, which is a game that, we've done probably close to 50 variants for different things at this point, if not more. And so it's something that is definitely a part of our creative business. All right. So that's number 6, experiment with variants. I should have had myself a water, but I think I've got a little bit left here. All right, I have 4 more lessons to do our Red 10 countdown. Thanks for hanging out with me. If you have not backed the Red 10 Kickstarter, or if you're interested in this 10-issue superhero maxi-series, it's collected into 2 thrilling volumes. We've got them in hardcover and softcover versions for both volumes, or a digital volume. You can get them both with some back matter and some other cool stuff. We also do have these custom Oxymoron minifigs for those of you that like cool stuff like this. So definitely check that out. And I've got just 4 more lessons to share with you. Perfectly honest, doing a project like this for this long, I probably could have made a list of 100 lessons learned from this. But, we got to keep things on brand, right? We got to keep things on brand. Speaking of, there's my branding, and we'll do that. But yeah, Scotty says for his latest book, had a standard cover and had an artist do exclusive cover plus offered blank covers. I think that's a great approach. Especially like those blank covers were something that we did with the Red 10 #1 when we did we started doing conventions, and those helped out a lot. And I'll be talking about that in a sec. All right. Tip number 7, lesson number 7 was to revise before you reprint. All right. Revise before you reprint. I saw someone on Twitter the other day, another creator asked the question, all right, if you're checking out another creator, like an indie creator or a peer's work, and you catch a typo or you catch some stuff that's just blatantly wrong, or stuff that just jumps out as, hey, this is an error. Do you tell him or her, or don't you? Right. And it's some of you might be like, oh, you got to tell him. Some of you might be like, and it is a little bit of a tough one, because like there's nothing worse as a creator to hear to like, after you've spent like a money for a big print run or doing all these things, or you're so excited about your book, and to have someone be like, well, on page 42, you've got, you've got a typo. Like, then for the rest of your life, that's what you're going to see on your book and think about on your book. There's a book on the shelf. I won't tell you which, because then you won't see it either. But there's a book on your shelf that like, there's a typo, not even in the, like, there's a typo in like the indicia or in the table of contents. And to this day, it's been years later, when I pick up that book or look at that book, like the first thing I think about is me missing that typo on the table of contents, right? So it is this awful thing, right? But my response to that creator was that the only reason to point out that stuff is, one, either if that creator is looking for like critical feedback, wants to be, you to look really hard and is open to that constructive criticism of like, hey, here's my book. What do you think? And how can I make it better for the next one? Or if that person is going back to print, because and in the indie comics world, some people do 10 copies, 25 copies, 50 copies, 100 copies, even 1,000 copies in the grand scheme of things. For a lot of titles, not that many copies of a book. So if they're going back to press, then you definitely want to let them know about those typos or those things, because if you're going back to press, you have the opportunity to fix it. And for the Red 10 series, we went back to press several times, because we did a print run, like we did an initial print run just to have a book so that we could see what it would look like. Then we printed it again to do our micro distribution print run, and I caught some things that I really didn't like in from that first initial print things. A couple panels that just weren't going, some continuity errors, some typos, some double and so after that, I was super thrilled that I only printed like 10 at a time for that first print run, because and that was just like a print on demand digital print run, because I would not have wanted to send that product out to retailers, right? And so revise then. But then after we got it printed up and did the retailer reaction and got some feedback from retailers and from fans that got it from that, we did another round of edits. One of the biggest things I did was there's a version of the Red 10 going around with a red background. And what I found was that the red on the red with the character red, it was just too red. And so before we went to the direct market version, I asked CP if he could take another crack at or actually, no, you know what? It wasn't CP. I reached out to Ty Tyner. I believe Ty Tyner was who colored this, right? Yep, that's right. That's right. Ty Tyner colored this. And I asked him to take another crack to try to find a way to make sure that our characters weren't getting lost in all of the red. And they did that by hitting it with the gray background, and so the red on gray. And so for our direct market release, we sort of changed the cover coloring around. We also updated found a couple of things that we wanted to change inside the version. And then when it came time to collect the first 5 issues into volume 1, went through and made sure that we cleaned up any errors. There were a couple of panels that I'm just like, you know what, this could flow a little bit better if it was like this. Found a couple of things that, and so every time you go to print, it's an okay time to revise, to make some changes, to do some editing. Obviously, if you have a huge rabid fan base that are going to call you on whether or not Han shot first and then he didn't, but now he did again, and then he didn't again, and now he didn't, but depending upon which, like, I don't even know. Like, sometimes your fans will call you out on that, so you got to be prepared for that. But remember, like, every time you go to print, presumably these are going to be books that you're going to have and you're going to be selling, and you want to be passionate about selling. So make sure that you fix anything that drives you crazy before every print run, and you'll just be happy with that. You'll be a lot more happy with your book. All right. So that was number 8 and number 7. Number 8 is to pay attention to fan reaction. All right. Pay attention to fan reaction. I can remember the very first convention I did in New York, the very first New York Comic-Con I did. This was the first convention, first New York Comic-Con I tabled at. It was myself, Joe Mulvey, and John Lees. All right. And so I was there with the Red 10. Joe was there. I think I don't think Caesar was there that year, but maybe he was. But I think it was just me, Joe, and John. I was there with or maybe Caesar came for a part of it. I don't know. I can't remember. Caesar can remind me next time. But I was there with the Red 10. Joe was there with Scam. John was there with the Standard. And this was the first time we were really pitching this book in public and getting it out there. But one of the things that we had was we had the first issue of the Red 10, and we had artist editions, blank artist edition sketch covers of the Red 10. So what I was doing while I was there at conventions, when John was selling or Joe's selling, I was sitting down and I was just drawing sketch covers of on the Red 10. And the two main characters that I was mostly drawing was Red right here and Oxymoron. And the strangest thing was happening in that, like, as I was drawing the Oxymoron character, I would be like like 2/3 done with a sketch cover, and people would stop and say, "How much is that one?" Or they would say, "Hey, is that one claimed?" And again, this was baffling to me because it happened over and over and over again. And we probably sold 10, 15 artist edition sketch covers of the Oxymoron, a character that literally no one had ever heard of before. They just loved the look. And then when we told them the high concept behind him, that he was a serial killer obsessed with contradiction, so all his targets are hypocrites in some way, that was enough for them to be like, love the concept, love the visual look of the character. They're like, whoa, did you just cross over Joker with Deadpool? It's like, kinda. Would that make you want it? If so, yeah, this is your book. And so that just that visual appeal of the character was something that it was obvious that there was an impact there. And when one of the retailers, shout out to Larry from Larry's Comics, he was like, "Oh man, you have to do more with this character. He needs to become like the star of the show when talking about the Oxymoron character." And so, you know what? We listened to that, and that sort of got me saying that, you know what, we need to do an Oxymoron spinoff. We need to do more with this character because, truth be told, in the Red 10, he is a supporting character. He doesn't get a ton of, he gets a fair amount of screen time or page time, and I believe he makes the most of the scenes that he's in. But it's a big cast; it's an ensemble. He didn't get to take center stage, and so I had that, but I knew that the fan reaction, the instant visceral appeal of the character was such that we had to go and do more with him. What that turned into was the Oxymoron Volume 1 Anthology Kickstarter launch, the very first Kickstarter that Comics Tribe launched. Did that under the Tyler James account, but that was the very first one that we did. That Kickstarter was trying to raise 8,000, I believe, and we raised 26,000. 26,000 at the time was more sales than we had done over the previous 4 years combined, and it completely changed the game for Comics Tribe. And the whole reason why that was able to happen was simply because I paid attention to how fans were reacting to the work that we put out, right? And so very, very important. See what people connect with and give them more of that. It doesn't have to be more difficult than that. All right. So lesson number 8 is to pay attention to fan reaction. Lesson number 9 is to practice and perfect your pitch and then lock it in. All right. I have probably to date pitched the Red 10 over 1,000 times. But I pitch, I mean, hey, have you heard of the Red 10? Okay, so basically the Red 10 is how I would kill off the Justice League if DC was ever crazy enough to let me. In the series, this character Red is murdered, and so her super team decides to track track her nemesis down to an island fortress, and then everything goes to hell. And they presume he did it, and one by one character in each issue is eliminated. And as the series goes on, you start to realize that one of the ones left may be behind it all. Now, that was probably the worst pitch that I've done for the Red 10. Apparently, I'm a little out of water and running out of steam here. But given that pitch like 1,000 times, you can do it in your sleep, more or less. But it doesn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen right out of the gate. And the first time at conventions that I pitched it, it took a lot longer to get the basic concept across. It didn't hit or connect as much. And but so much of being really good at getting people to take an interest in your stuff is to being able to try out a lot of different pitches, see how people connect with, see what draws them in instead of makes them, confused, and then try that again. And then once you have it in place, then you have the ability to sort of get that same reaction over and over and over again. And so once it's in place, don't change it. Once you have your pitch, lock it in and rock it and rock it over and over and over again. All right. And so, but for those of you who maybe haven't done conventions or you're relying solely on Kickstarter to launch your stuff, I have to tell you, the fact that I was able to have opportunities to pitch in real time to real, honest, living, breathing human beings and see reactions, see what lines they connected with, what word combinations that drew them in versus repelled them versus made questions they asked, so that I could come back and provide that information. By doing that in real time and getting that experience at conventions and doing it over and over and over and over again, made it so that writing a Kickstarter page for the Red 10 is super easy. Pitching the Red 10 online and elsewhere, pitching it to retailers, and pitching it in a way so that your fans will pitch it to other people the way that works. That comes from doing conventions. That comes from pitching it over and over and over again. And so you want to fall in love with your pitches. You want to hone your pitches. You want to get them down just to the essential elements. But then once you have it, lock that in. And then lesson number 10, last but not least, which is related to the repetition of pitching that pitch, is that here's the lesson, is that no matter how long your independent comic book has been out, most people won't have heard about it. And that's a good thing. All right. This baffled me. I first started pitching the Red 10 at conventions, I believe in 2011. And obviously taking a new book to someplace like New York Comic Con, no one will have heard of it before. All right. And so you'd say things like, and they might come up, what's the Red 10 about? And you'll come back the next year and then you might want to say, hey, have you heard of the Red 10? And what I found was the following year, we would have a handful of people that would come back to the table looking for the next issue, wanting to talk about the series, wanting to find out what else you're working on, and they would immediately buy it. But that was just of 100,000 people, it would just be a handful or, a few dozen at most as we started going, people that were coming back. but 99% of the people that would cross your table will have never heard of the Red 10. And that happened the next year and the next year and the next year and the next year. But the cool thing about that was that sales stayed the same or went up. And that's actually a good thing, right? Because a good pitch and a pitch that you've perfected and refined that worked 5, 6, 7 years ago for a book that people didn't know about then, well, it's not like, even if it's not new to you, it's going to be new to other people, as long as you pitch it with that same enthusiasm and that same energy. I found that a lot of creators, they stop selling books and a lot of times great books, not because they stop selling, but because they stop being excited about selling them. And so one of the great things and the great gifts that you can give to yourself as an independent creator is don't stop being excited about your past work, right? Keep selling it. Keep being passionate about it, because most of the people that you interact with are going to be people that have never come across your stuff before. And yes, of course, if you're going to small shows, like very, very small shows, and you've been doing it year after year after year after year after year, yeah, maybe people will get used to it, and maybe maybe less people it will be new to less people than it was before. But there's a lot of new blood that comes in and a lot of new fans that come in. And even though the Red 10 is a series that has been out and has been in the direct market, and we did free comic book day, we gave away 50,000 copies of the Red 10 Zero in comic shops worldwide during free comic book day several years ago. And still, I've got a lot of comments on here. Of course, a lot of comments of people coming back, but a lot of comments also from people saying, hey, you know what? I'm so glad that Kickstarter put this on my feed, because I would have missed it and I'd never heard of it before. And it sounds like it's totally my jam. All right. And so I want you to understand that your passion for your series and continuing that over the time is going to be key to keeping it selling. And that no matter how long you've been at this, especially in the independent world, most of the comic reading public, most of the English language speaking and English reading genre fans, most of them haven't heard of your thing yet. And that's a good thing, because that means that it can keep selling and selling and selling and selling. All right. And so I wanted to just thank all of you for tuning in. I want to thank, I think just while we were on live here, we raised about $250. So I want to thank anyone that jumped on live and backed as we went here. Just check out a few comments here. Virgin. Let me know if anyone has any questions or anything before I sign off. David Byrne did a Virgin variant of an ash can, sold out 150 copies in 2 days. Yeah, people love having something. Like, here's the thing: we are serving a collector market. If we choose to, we can serve a collector market if we choose to. And collectors want things that other people don't have, right? So making things that are limited, that are exclusive, that are special in one or multiple ways is one of the keys to making it so that you're serving not just the readers out there, but also the collectors. And it can be very helpful at you keeping your thing going and profitable. Awesome. Well, I want to thank everybody so much for all the support of the Red 10 over the years, over the past decade. I want to, Scotty, I'll follow up with you on that one directly. But yeah, so I want to thank everyone for watching. I want to thank everyone for backing on behalf of Caesar and myself and the entire Comics Tribe. We've got a new decade of Comics Tribe comics coming your way in 2020. We're going to have some big announcements. We've got some new series. We've got some returning characters. We've got some spin-offs. It's going to be fun. I think you're going to love what we have in store for all of you coming up in the years. Well, hell, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. 2020 is going to be a big year for Comics Tribe and Comics Tribe books. Can't wait to have all of you on board for that. Not the Red 11, however. You'll see in the bonus scene, we make it pretty clear in the bonus scene that was not in stores, that was not published in the original version of the Red 10 series. The bonus scene that's inside the back of this, we make it pretty clear that there's a definitive ending here. All right. And so I hope you look forward to getting that and getting your hands on that. All right. Thanks, everybody. Tyler James signing off. Thank you so much for being a part of our tribe.